have any idea which war resulted in the most deaths of American soldiers? It's not any of the world wars and not even the Vietnam War. The answer is the Civil War, which led to the deaths of an estimated 620,000 soldiers. So let's figure out what caused the Civil War and how did it become the deadliest war in American history. Hi, welcome to our channel, Eventful Insights. Today we'll get to understand American history better by taking a closer look at one of its most central events, the Civil War. Together, let's explore the facts of the Civil War. Before we begin, why don't you test your knowledge and see if you can remember which president was elected at the outset of the Civil War? Tell us in the comments below. Now let's start. In the simplest form, the American Civil War was a 4-year-long war from 1861 to 1865 between the United States and 11 southern states that left the Union and created the Confederate States of America. So, we need to understand first why the Confederate States of America were created. Between 1815 and 1861, the northern states saw rapid changes in their economy. While farming, mostly on smaller farms using free labor, was still the main activity, industries were growing. The North had invested heavily in transportation like canals, roads, steamboats and railroads, as well as in financial industries such as banking and insurance. They also had a well-developed communications network with newspapers, magazines, books, and the telegraph widely available. In contrast, the southern economy relied heavily on large farms called plantations, which mainly produced cash crops like cotton using slave labor. Instead of investing in industries like the North, Southerners put their money into slaves, considering them as valuable property. By 1860, most of the investment in manufacturing was in the northern states, even though the South had more wealth per person. The high demand for cotton in the 1850s led to a rise in its price and the value of slaves, making slavery seem like a profitable investment for Southerners. The issue of whether slavery should be allowed in new territories and states had been debated since the Northwest Ordinance of 1784. The end of the Mexican-American War in 1848 and the acquisition of new territory intensified the debate. In the 1850s, more Northerners started opposing slavery, either for moral reasons or to protect free labor. Meanwhile, many Southerners feared that restricting slavery's expansion would threaten its existence. As the decade progressed, the divide between the North and South deepened, and politicians found it increasingly difficult to find compromises. Abraham Lincoln, leader of the new Republican Party, in his famous campaign against Stephen A. Douglas in 1858, described the United States as a country divided between slavery and freedom. He quoted, "A house divided against itself cannot stand," and emphasized that he believed the country couldn't last if it remained part slave and part free. Lincoln aimed to stop slavery from spreading further, hoping to make people believe it would eventually die out. Although Lincoln lost the Senate election in 1858, 2 years later, he won the presidency against a divided Democratic Party. This marked the first time in a long while that the South didn't have significant control over the national government. Southerners saw this as a warning sign. With the majority of Americans living in free states and little chance of pro-slavery forces winning future elections, the future of slavery looked bleak. To prevent expected anti-slavery actions by Lincoln's incoming administration, 7 slave states first seceded between 1860 and 1861. South Carolina was the first to leave, then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed. They all decided to break away from the country between December 1860 and February 1861. Virginia joined them in April 1861, and then Arkansas and Tennessee followed suit. Finally, North Carolina decided to leave in May 1861. This series of events led to the creation of the Confederate States of America and eventually to the Civil War. Before we continue, what were your thoughts on the pro- and anti-slave situations back then? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to watch more interesting videos about our history and unsolved mysteries, check out our channel. Let's continue. So, with the southern states feeling left out of the political system, they saw secession as their only option, a decision that would inevitably lead to war. At a gathering in Montgomery, Alabama, the first 7 states that had seceded came together to draft the Confederate Constitution. This document resembled the United States Constitution, but placed more emphasis on the independence of each state. Jefferson Davis was appointed as the temporary president of the Confederacy until formal elections could take place. At Lincoln's inauguration on March 4th, he stated that he had no intention of ending slavery where it already existed, but he was firm that he would not allow states to secede from the Union. He hoped to resolve the crisis peacefully, without resorting to war. When Lincoln decided to send supplies to Fort Sumter, he informed South Carolina beforehand to avoid conflict. However, South Carolina feared it might be a trick. They demanded that the fort's commander, Robert Anderson, surrender immediately. Anderson offered to surrender only after he had used up his supplies, but South Carolina rejected his offer. On April 12th, the Civil War began when shots were fired at Fort Sumter. Eventually, Fort Sumter surrendered to South Carolina. The attack on Fort Sumter led 4 additional states to join the Confederacy. When Virginia seceded, Richmond became the capital of the Confederacy. Public pressure led General-in-Chief Winfield Scott to push for an attack on the South even before his inexperienced troops were fully trained. He instructed General Irvin McDowell to lead an advance on Confederate forces stationed at Manassas Junction, Virginia. On July 21, 1861, the First Battle of Bull Run, also called First Manassas in the South, commenced. General Stonewall Jackson led 35,000 Confederate soldiers to victory over a larger Union force. This defeat dashed hopes of a quick win for the Union and forced President Lincoln to ask for 500,000 more soldiers. Both the North and the South realized that the war wouldn't be short or limited, so they had to recruit more troops than initially expected. George B. McClellan became the top Union commander after General Winfield Scott retired. McClellan, beloved by his troops, hesitated to take bold actions, frustrating President Lincoln. In 1862, McClellan led his Army of the Potomac toward Richmond, but faced setbacks against Confederate forces, led by Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson. McClellan's request for more troops was denied by Lincoln, who ordered his withdrawal. McClellan was replaced by Henry W. Halleck, but still led the Army of the Potomac. Lee then moved his troops northward, clashing with Union forces under John Pope in the Second Battle of Bull Run. Lee's victory led to the first Confederate invasion of the North. Despite conflicting orders, McClellan engaged Lee's forces in Maryland. The Battle of Antietam became the bloodiest day of the war, ending with a Union victory. However, McClellan's failure to pursue Lee drew criticism, and he was replaced by Ambrose E. Burnside. Burnside's attempt to attack Lee near Fredericksburg failed, leading to heavy Union casualties. Burnside was replaced by Joseph "Fighting Joe" Hooker, and both armies settled into winter camps. After the Union victory at Antietam, Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, freeing enslaved people in rebellious states after January 1, 1863, weakening the Confederacy and gaining global support for the Union. Around 186,000 black soldiers joined the Union by the war's end, with 38,000 dying. In 1863, Lee's surprise attack at Chancellorsville halted General Hooker's plan. Although the Confederates won, they suffered heavy losses. Lee then invaded the North again, clashing with General George Meade's forces at Gettysburg. Despite heavy casualties, The Confederates couldn't break through, and Meade's decision not to counterattack allowed Lee to retreat into Virginia, ending Confederate invasions of the North. In the same year, Union forces under Ulysses S. Grant secured a crucial victory at Vicksburg. In 1864, Lincoln put Grant in charge of all Union armies. Despite heavy losses, Grant relentlessly pursued Lee in Virginia. Lee attempted to resist, but surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, after Grant's forces chased him. General Joseph E. Johnston surrendered around 90,000 Confederate soldiers in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida on April 26, 1865, at Bennett Place in North Carolina. But this wasn't the final Confederate surrender. The final battle of the Civil War took place at Palmito Ranch, Texas, on May 13, 1865. The first three post-war amendments brought about significant and swift changes in American society and politics: the end of slavery, the granting of equal citizenship, and the right to vote for former slaves, all in just 5 years. This transformation of over 4 million slaves into citizens with equal rights became the main focus of the tumultuous 12-year Reconstruction era following the Civil War. During this time, the promise of equal rights was briefly realized, but largely ignored afterward. And so that's it. What were your key learnings from this video? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. If you enjoyed watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell. Thanks for watching.